The beauty of vintage toys is that it taps into the imaginations of grown adults living their best childhood memories. In the case of wrestling, that not only meant having the figures, but also late nights sitting on the couch watching old MTV specials that began in 1984, or the semi-regular NBC series known as Saturday Night's Main Event that began in 1985. Now, as far as booking your favorite matches from the comfort of your bedroom or your living room went, the history of wrestling toys is a checkered one at best. The Toys That Made Us Season 3 documentary episode chronicles the positional jockeying for the World Wrestling Federation figure license between now defunct toy companies Remco as well as Galoob before ultimately landing with LJN in 1984. LJN had previously worked on toy lines based on popular intellectual properties such as E.T., Magnum P.I., Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and also eventually released toys based on Indiana Jones as well as Thundercats. The world of professional wrestling would make a fine addition to LJN's star-studded lineup of figures. Unfortunately, the 8-inch scale figures lacked any articulation, aside from being able to bend the rubbery material ever so slightly, a choice that was made when the manufacturer decided against putting flexible wiring inside a figure of this size, thus resulting in a lack of overall posability. And although this resulted in virtually zero action feature gimmick, the vibrant colors, expressive nature, and bulky size of these figures still made for lots of playful fun. Stay tuned, because this is the story of LJN's WWF Superstars, Series 1 of 1984. Hi everyone, this is Ken with Toy Connections. If you would like to see more figure reviews, figure comparisons, toy histories, collection footage, and toy insights in general, please be sure to hit subscribe, click that notification bell, and press like. While this opening series saw the emergence of Vince McMahon's WWE, or WWF at the time, on the pegs and shelves of toy aisles, only 9 figures were made in this first year, with the vast majority of the talent roster being saved for subsequent releases. Of course, since he had won the world title in the early part of 1984 and became the poster boy of the rock and wrestling movement that dominated this area, Hulk Hogan was released in this first wave along with his championship belt. He had won the title from the Iron Sheik, who Hulk not only feuded with at live events, but also in a short-lived Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling cartoon series that ran from 1985 to 86 that happened to feature many characters from this initial 1984 wave of figures. I do think that the cheerful expression of the Series 1 Hogan figure draws a lot from the Rock and Wrestling cartoon. While the figure is iconic and a must-have for even the most casual LJN WWF collector, the paint rubs off of the knees a little too easily, and it's hard to find one in super mint condition. As far as the figure proportions go though, he's a bit skinnier than I would expect from a line of jacked up, bulky figures, and I actually personally prefer his Series 5 appearances in either the white or red shirt that has a more fierce demeanor on his face. Having said that, the yellow trunks and boots match his more common television and pay-per-view appearances, so for that reason alone, I can see collectors being drawn to this figure. Hey, it's certainly staying on my shelf. Hogan would go on to headline the first 9 WrestleManias in some way, shape, or form, spanning 5 world title reigns and defeating opponents such as the likes of King Kong Bundy, Andre the Giant, Macho Man Randy Savage, and Sergeant Slaughter. If you're new to this series of figures and could have your pick of any figure to start your run, I'm sure many people would pick Hulk Hogan first. Now, among the wrestlers that people seem to talk less about these days is the one-time protege of Hulk Hogan, none other than the friendly hillbilly known as Hillbilly Jim. A relatable character due to his overalls and his catchy country music theme song, Jim spent most of his time in the mid-card scene, but was a fun act of sorts who was presented as being carefree and not active in the more serious storylines. The WWE also presented him as being part of a family with relatives such as Uncle Elmer, but if I'm being honest, none of them connected with the audience the same way that Hillbilly Jim did. Mine is in pretty good condition paint-wise, and he's one of the few figures that comes with an accessory, i.e. his signature hat that he would take to the ring with him. And while he never reached the booming heights of some of the other stars of the 1980s, Hillbilly Jim was a reliable mainstay during this period and eventually returned in the mid-90s as a manager for the Godwin cousins during the WWE's New Generation run. He would also make quick appearances in gimmick battle royals as a fun throwback act. And while we're on the subject of friendly characters, let's talk about the friendly giant of this era and, well, okay, first let's address this face scan. Don't get me wrong, I love Andre the Giant, the 8th wonder of the world, as much as the next guy, and I know scanning technology of the 80s isn't what it is today, but the likeness feels just a little too far off compared to some of the other characters. But thankfully they got much closer with his Series 2 and Series 6 figures. It's just kind of obvious that they didn't try too hard for this one. But hey, the innocence of toys from this era still allows me to enjoy this figure nonetheless. Alright, so back on track. Prior to his famous heel turn in 1987, Andre was beloved by the fans through the 1970s and through to the mid-1980s. When Hogan won the title in 1984, Andre was among the first to congratulate him, spraying champagne all over him in a celebratory manner in a cheerful post-match aftermath. And I think he got a little bit of that champagne on Mean Gene Okerlund as well. And while he's slightly less remembered for this era of his career than he was later on, it is notable that since he was more mobile during this era, he was able to throw drop kicks, which is impressive for a man of his size, as he was younger and more durable prior to the back surgery, which limited his movements later on. Simply put, there are no words that can put into context what Andre did as far as being a backstage leader to the boys goes. He was a respected and beloved individual by all, and he couldn't exactly go to public places without being noticed due to his sizable appearance. As such, he was pretty much forced to live the wrestling life 24/7, and he's been sorely missed since his passing in 1993. On the subject of beloved characters, here is the Junkyard Dog. Now, after moving from the NWA territories to the World Wrestling Federation in 1984, JYD had the perfect charisma and gimmick to fit right in with the other stars of this era. A strong babyface, he was known for bringing people in attendance into the ring to dance with him after he would win a match, giving himself a charming nature and being a fun attraction of sorts. He did have some good mid-card feuds and appeared at the early WrestleManias, but I personally see a missed opportunity in the Dog, as he does strike me as someone who could have succeeded in the main event scene rather than just playing second fiddle to the top superstars during this period. All that considered, none of this sours my memory of the smiling, collar-wearing, chain-carrying, fun-loving JYD. You will notice that my figure has the collar, but the chain is absent. That's okay, as I may be able to track one down sometime. His 4-year initial run with the WWE means that his peak years actually coincided with those of the peak years of the LJN release of figures, and thus, here he is. He did also spend some time in WCW later on in his career. As we move along with other colorful characters of this golden period, who could ever forget Superfly Jimmy Snuka? I'll start right away with the most famous moment of his career, when he leapt off of the 15-foot-high steel cage onto Don Morocco during the events of an October 1983 show, a highlight that has been played over and over throughout the decades. And because he was already over 40 years old by the time of the true golden years of this wrestling period, I often wonder if this held back his ability to be pushed up higher on the card. Having said that, he was in Mr. T and Hulk Hogan's corner for the inaugural WrestleMania, so his supporting role in the main event of this historic landmark show is cemented in the annals of history. It was cool to see him feuding with Rowdy Roddy Piper or Cowboy Bob Orton during these years, before he took a couple years to wrestle elsewhere, before returning again to the WWE for a stint between 1989 and 1993. Superfly does have the somewhat dubious achievement of being The Undertaker's first opponent at a WrestleMania, which of course kicked off Taker's extended undefeated streak at the Showcase of the Immortals. Whatever the case, Jimmy Snuka's place in wrestling history is indeed immortalized. As for the top villains of this era, let's look at the Hot Rod himself, Rowdy Roddy Piper. A man who needs absolutely no introduction, Piper was all about the wrestling business, including protecting it. He was the first guy to demand respect for the industry when he felt that an outsider like Mr. T was coming in to capitalize on the hype of the first WrestleMania. Whether he was right or wrong, you can never argue that Piper stood for what he believed in. Often showing up with his bodyguard, the ace Cowboy Bob Orton, Rowdy Roddy Piper showcased himself pretty much as the top heel of the WWF during these early years. His Piper's Pit segments often made for the start of many feuds, whether he was picking a fight with the aforementioned Jimmy Snuka or betraying his former friend Paul Orndorff, who was his tag team partner during WrestleMania 1. No matter what he did though, it's hard to think of Piper as anything less than an icon of wrestling. For me, personally, because I came into wrestling closer to the late 1980s, I remember Piper as a smiling babyface with longer hair, sticking up for other good guys, and even serving as a color commentator with Gorilla Monsoon. Though, whether he was a heel or whether he was a babyface, he always sported his signature kilt. He became actually pretty iconic for that as well, and even years later Ronda Rousey would sport a similar kilt and an attire as tribute to Roddy Piper. Don't lose the kilt though for this LJN figure. It's a somewhat expensive piece to track down if you don't find him complete. Though, if your figure doesn't have the kilt, well, whatever, just toss him in the ring and have him ring ready for one of your matches. And while Piper may have been the more famous villain of this period, we need to talk about the Iron Sheik, probably one of the more well-known transitional champions, meaning a guy who only holds the belt for a short period as a placeholder until the long-term champion is ready, the Sheik held the title for about a month after defeating Bob Backlund in late 1983 before dropping it to Hulk Hogan, who of course went on to carry the belt for 4 straight years thereafter. The Sheik was probably most well known for swinging his heavy Persian clubs, which was much harder than it looked, and it was revealed in a 2021 episode of WWE's Most Wanted Treasures that each club actually weighs 75 pounds, meaning it not only took a lot of strength to do it, but also incredible coordination for the Sheik to do what he did. He's also well known for his bitter rivalry with Sergeant Slaughter, which concluded in a boot camp match before he went on to team with Nikolai Volkoff for an extended period. Managed by Freddie Blassie, they had the tag team titles for several months, and come to think of it, the Sheik is for sure underrated when discussing wrestling's all-time greats, seeing as he held both the singles world title as well as a tag team title as part of his history. This is something I actually didn't even consider until it was about time to make this video. But hey, you learn something new every day, right? And since we're already on the subject, his tag team partner Nikolai Volkoff was also released as part of this first wave. Originally portrayed as a villainous Russian, Volkoff would often sing the Russian national anthem before matches, with the Sheik standing to his side. As mentioned earlier, they had a tag team title run together and often proclaimed Iran and Russia as being number one in their eyes. After a while though, Volkoff would find himself teaming with Boris Zukov and continued feuding with other tag teams in the WWE, be it against the Bushwhackers or the Powers of Pain or another team. But after a period of time, and like many of the heels during this era, Volkoff became a fun-loving, smiling babyface. Sporting now both the Russian flag as well as the American national flag on his entrance coat, he feuded with a newly heel-turned Sergeant Slaughter sometime later. Whatever the case, Volkoff is certainly a recognizable character for this era of wrestling. If you say his name, to most people who watched during this period, they certainly will recognize him. As for the last, but certainly not least character of this series, here's another big man, Big John Studd. A member of the Heenan family, Big John was the original big man of the Heenan family stable. John feuded with Andre the Giant and famously got slammed in the $15,000 Body Slam Challenge at WrestleMania 1, with Big John coming out on the losing end. This feud ran for quite some time, and it was notable for being one of the non-title related matches that people would love to come see anyway as a big-time attraction. After all, who wouldn't want to see two giants square off with one another? Within this time frame, you'd often see Big John team up with fellow big man King Kong Bundy, forming a core team of baddies to take on some of our favorite stars. He was also famously known for eliminating William the Refrigerator Perry during a WrestleMania 2 Battle Royal, though Perry got his revenge just moments later. Now, an underrated moment, yet still a crowning achievement of Studd's career, was his win of the 1989 Royal Rumble. I have to admit, when I watched this pay-per-view, I didn't expect him to come out as the winner, but it was good to see someone outside of the top 2 or 3 stars of the World Wrestling Federation at the time win this match. Well, that rounds out the 9 figures that were released in this LJN WWF Wrestling Superstars line of figures in 1984. Certainly, those of you who grew up with these toys would have tons of memories booking various matches and feuds with your friends at school or at home for playtime later. And the great thing about the collecting hobby today, you can still book these matches right now. Otherwise, that's it for this video. Do me a favor and share it with your fellow wrestling fans. Now, if you did enjoy this video and you want to see some of my other content, please click into one of these videos here. And on your way out, don't forget to hit this subscribe button. Otherwise, I'll see you again soon with some more of my favorite toys. Take care.